That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Knock at the Cabin, the 15th film directed by M. Night Shyamalan, which Universal is releasing February 3rd, 2023, otherwise known as 2323. 2323.
Oh. I'm so slow. We all know M. Night Shyamalan. What are like two of your favorite films of his?
Well, The Village by default because of Sigourney, although there are some major problems with that film. But I do like it. And Signs?
Noted. So, I thought this movie was okay.
That's usually how I feel about most of his films. Well, they're either, borderline terrible sometimes or okay. Sometimes I did like Old, not a bit, and The Visit.
After reading the plot of the novel this movie's based on, I wish this movie would have stuck closer to the novel, and I wish maybe a more serious director would have handled this picture. I kept saying to you that I wish it would have been the lady who did the Babadook.
Jennifer Kent. I also think of queer filmmaker like Sebastian Silva, who's a bit more... Think of like Nasty Baby and how we get that kind of turn about those people once they, murder the homeless man. You're like, who are we watching and why was I rooting for them in the first place? But yes, I totally agree with that. Although, again, I appreciate Shyamalan, kind of making this attempt. But it's based on the 2018 novel by Paul G. Tremblay, The Cabin at the End of the World. And the adapted screenplay by Michael Sherman and Steve Desmond was a big blacklist and glad list in 2019 screenplay, and Shyamalan, I believe, reconstituted it for his means.
This movie feels like something that would have streamed on Hulu to me, but the basic story is there is a gay male couple on like a holiday in some cabin in the woods in Pennsylvania.
Eric and Andrew, played by Jonathan Groff and Ben Aldridge.
They are there with their adopted 8-year-old daughter.
When Kristen Cui.
One day, 4 strangers show up at the door, talking about they need to come inside and talk to them. Mm-hmm. They are super polite, but they have weapons. Mm-hmm. Basically, they're like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They tell these 3, the end of the world is coming unless you sacrifice one of the 3 of you. And if you don't, everyone in the world will die, and you will just roam the scorched earth for eternity. Mm-hmm. So, of course, they're like, hell no, we're not killing any one of us. And the visitors say, we can't kill you, and we're not going to. But we're going to ask you, each one of us, will you do this? And if you say no, then we have to die, and like some plague will happen. So one by one, each of them asks, will one of you kill one of the 3? And they say no. So we see flooding, we see like a plague, like a virus. They say the sky will fall like glass.
The sky will turn to glass, yeah.
And it's airplanes, like I believe they say 700 passenger planes fall from the sky. And the 4th person standing says, okay, this is your last chance. If I die, then the apocalypse is coming, but you have a couple of minutes. There's like a buffer where you can still sacrifice one of your own. They say no again. He kills himself, and then we can see the apocalypse is coming. Like the sky gets dark and lightning is striking. And Jonathan Groff's character, we'll get into it, but he's the one who kind of says, like, I believe them. Mm-hmm. Like after everything I've seen. And plus he says he had a vision earlier on in the film. I'll sacrifice myself. And we can talk about the speech he gives, but he says, kill me. His partner does. And then the apocalypse is staved. Mm-hmm. The end.
It's staved off, yes. I think there are a lot of interesting things here. I think it's, the apocalypse as a moral dilemma kind of film. And I really do kind of like the basis of it. And I wish I had read the novel. But there's a rudimentary level to it, like a lot of Shyamalan's films, where it doesn't feel desperate enough or serious enough, and definitely not ambiguous enough. And I think, Shyamalan, his third film was Sixth Sense, and that ushered in this era of the twist films, which kind of were his undoing. But when you have the major twist that he used to do, he likes that hook where there is a definite answer. And this how he's changing the author's prose, this ends up feeling like a faith-based horror film that's like the Left Behind series by Tim LaHaye.
I agree completely. It needed to be more serious and more ambiguous because the way the film differs from the book is that in the book, first of all, the little 8-year-old girl, she gets killed. So now the couple, the gay couple, are questioning, like, what kind of God would do this? Like, let this little girl die and then not even accept her as a sacrifice. And in the end, the couple decides not to sacrifice one another. They just go off, and then we don't know. Like, it's made ambiguous whether or not the strangers were even telling the truth or they were just having some sort of shared delusion and were psychotic. But in this film, like you said, it's like very clear that the apocalypse was going to come and the one sacrificing himself stopped it. I just think, yeah, and it's just not serious. You know, like the way the visitors are demonstrating that the apocalypse is coming is via news footage. So there's this flat screen TV mounted and we see on the news that, like, the different incidents I explained. And at one point we get an infomercial for an air fryer with Shyamalan making like a cameo. And I just thought we didn't need that.
Well, that's his signature.
I know, but it just makes it seem so like...
Well, he's copying what Hitchcock used to do, although Hitchcock's little cameos were much more subtle and usually weren't speaking lines. But
I do want to say, I think all of the actors did a good job. I really liked the little girl. I thought she did a really good job.
Her film debut. He is good at conjuring a kind of earnestness with his characters, and like I usually always feel, he's like the progeny of Steven Spielberg and Stephen King. This dysfunctional family thing with this dystopic end of the world stuff going on. You know, think any Steven Spielberg movie mixed with The Stand.
I like Jonathan Groff. I like Ben Aldridge. I think Dave Bautista is really good in the role. He plays like a grade school teacher. He's very mild-mannered, very sweet.
Leonard.
And of course, his physical appearance is in contrast to how he behaves. So he's very appealing on screen. Although I think because of how the film is made, it comes across as like cutesy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that this story needed to have anything about it that was cutesy.
I agree.
The black lady who's the nurse.
Yes, Nikki Amuka-Bird, who was in Old previously.
I really liked her.
Sabrina.
Rupert Grint from Harry Potter. I thought he did a fine job.
Yeah, and Abby Quinn, who's Adriane, who we just saw in Torn Hearts with Katie Seagal. She also plays Jenny Slate's sister in Landline.
Could I just quickly go through my few notes?
Well, I wanted to say, I immediately knew that they were a four horsemen of the apocalypse type thing. And then, this again, because Shyamalan likes definites, he has to spell that out for us. And it's...
When the opening of the film is the little girl is playing like outside of the cabin. She's collecting grasshoppers. And I thought it was really cute because she's keeping a journal and naming all the grasshoppers. And I laughed out loud because in her journal, she has columns for like the different thing in the data she's collecting. And one of the columns says energy level. She's describing the grasshoppers as being like mean, sleepy. I thought that was super cute. And then we see Dave Bautista walking towards her from the distance. And you already know it's going to be a problem. And I wish the film wouldn't have opened with that. I wish it would have opened with this family in the cabin and there's a knock on the door. Because it's just like immediately we know something's not right. I don't know. When they actually do knock on the door, it didn't have the impact that it could have.
Sure.
So it was kind of like a slow start. And then when they explain that they're there to stop the apocalypse, I was kind of like, okay. And then we literally go through each of them asking and dying, which felt a little repetitive.
Yes, it does. And then we also don't really get to spend enough time with this familial unit. And Shyamalan often has characters that have kind of lost their spirituality or their faith. And there's always this like teasing between faith versus fate, especially in something like Signs, which this relates to. This is also his second R-rated film after The Happening. And I think it's squandered. An R rating is actually squandered on this movie because most of the violence happens off screen. But I don't like The Happening whatsoever with Mark Wahlberg. But the mass suicides in that played on a type of maybe a little more body horror than this does because
I swore this was PG-13. When you said it was R after we watched it, I was shocked.
Well, I figured it was probably R after Ben Aldridge drops a few F-bombs all in a row. and it was shot by, there's two cinematographers listed, Lowell A. Meyer, who worked on Shyamalan's Servant, and this does have more of a TV feel to me, but the main cinematographer who's listed is Jarin Blaschke, who has lensed all three of Robert Eggers' films. And think of something like The Lighthouse, which is also primarily a single set film, and how vibrant that looks. I don't think that it really translates to how this looks.
I also didn't love the way the story's handled with regards to how these four strangers meet, because they explain that they all were having these visions, and then that they all had these shared visions. Mm-hmm. So of course it's like, okay, so did the visions bring you all together? No, a message board did. So of course, I believe it's Ben Aldridge's character is questioning it, like, this is crazy. Like, y'all got on the internet and like convinced yourselves of this thing, and you're having a shared delusion. And then we find out Rupert Grint's character is using a name that isn't his real name. And then we find out that he, prior to this incident, had gay bashed Ben Aldridge's character. Mm-hmm. So of course that coincidence makes it feel very like, I can see in the book how I would sort of, because the book is ambiguous, that it would make me think like, wait, are they targeting this couple? But because in the film it's so clear that the apocalypse is coming, the coincidence that Rupert Grint's character has a history with one of the guys felt kind of like pointless or weird.
Yes. And I like I like kind of what it's doing with the news footage thing, because it's playing with that notion of how in isolation, based on whatever limited facts we have available to us, colors or defines how we're interpreting what we're seeing. Like, so these terrible, horrible events that are happening around in the world, how they can be interpreted as the apocalypse coming based on the situation that these people are in. But, you know, maybe to somebody else that doesn't quite fit. I also wanted to add that the gay couple and how they, I think a gay filmmaker might have allowed a little more complexity for this couple, that one has kind of, you know, is anger management issues, maybe, the Ben Aldridge character, and we also don't get a whole lot about Jonathan Groff as being the more one that's vulnerable or prone to kind of the religious rhetoric that this group is spouting. But they are basically flawless. And, you know, how the behavior of a lot of gay men during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, I wanted to see some kind of tension of like, oh, damn, it is, because they weren't aware it was a same-sex couple, as they said, going into the cabin, of like, these people are prone to be selfish, perhaps.
Well, Ben he does, I mean, immediately he's like, I don't care, everyone can die, I am not killing one of us. So I did get the sense that Ben's character was very preoccupied with self-preservation, but I think that I do agree that I feel like that aspect of the situation should have been better developed, because really it's a question of, are you willing to let all of humanity perish? I mean, that is the center of the storyline.
Yes.
And I feel like there's no...
But logically, that kind of person, I think, somebody would have had the conversation, do I want to live in a world where this being is in charge that's going to traumatize people, and the traumatization is oblivious to the rest of the population that's going along, you know, fat, dumb, and happy?
Yes, that part, but also I feel like Jonathan Groff's character, they should have had a conversation where he goes, what if what they're saying is true? Mm-hmm. Are you really saying that you would let all of humanity die just to save one of us? Like, they don't really talk about that. So, yeah, that was missing for me. I did want to mention that the nurse, what's her character's name again?
Sabrina.
She says at one point, because every time they go up to be sacrificed, when they ask the question, are you willing to sacrifice yourself? They try to give some backstory as to who they are. And she explains that it took almost all of her life savings to come out there. But then we find out she drove from California to Pennsylvania, and she's an RN. Mm-hmm. It couldn't have cost that much money to drive cross country. I've done it many times. Mm-hmm. Your entire life savings was spent to drive to Pennsylvania? I thought that was a weird plot point.
There are just a few weird plot points, I think, that, again, lead this into a Twilight Zone type episode of a film rather than something, I think, a little more meaningful about humanity and about sacrifice and how our, you know, what does sacrifice mean? How connected are we?
Another thing that didn't work for me is we see Ben Aldridge's character get gay bashed. He's in the hospital. When he recovers, he's taking like he's at a shooting range taking lessons, and then he gets a license to own a gun. And he has brought that gun with him to the cabin. There, he's able to escape at one point. He gets the gun. And then he has an opportunity to kill Leonard, who is Dave Bautista's character. And instead, he's like, you can just go in the bathroom. And it's like, wait, you've been victimized already. You've witnessed 3 other people be killed. Your family's life is in danger. And you have the opportunity to kill this man who's like the leader. And you just let him go in the bathroom, and then immediately
he gets out of the bathroom.
Dave Bautista is able to disarm.
But he gets out of the... Well...
When I tell you I would have shot that man with the quickness, I just don't understand how this guy who's so angry and aggressive and has been brutalized already would not immediately shoot and kill this person.
Right.
Who he has already seen kill 3 other people.
But he fakes an escape from the bathroom by breaking out this little window that's like this big around.
That's right. And then... I don't know why they thought Dave Bautista had escaped the bathroom through a little portal. And the answer is he didn't. He's hiding in the shower. But my final note is I did cry at the very end. Because at the very end, when Dave Bautista's character is about to sacrifice himself, the gay couple tell their little daughter, go into the treehouse and put your headphones on. So after Jonathan Groff is sacrificed, Dave Bautista's dead, and now Ben Aldridge sees that everything's safe. He goes and gets her, and immediately the little girl says, did Daddy Eric save everyone? Mm-hmm. And I thought that was... It
was good, as was Jonathan Groff's kind of reconciliation with him saying, I'm fine dying.
Because he basically, we need to mention that. The way when he tells his partner, like, you need to sacrifice me, he says that I'm already at peace. I'm already envisioning, like, our daughter getting older and you spending time with her and like going to her law firm because Ben Aldridge's character is an attorney and you meeting her first boyfriend, and like I'm at peace knowing that. I thought that was very well done. But then the very, very end, when Ben and his daughter drive off, they stop at a diner.
A well-populated diner.
That's filled with people, and they're watching the news. And some of the footage was like, oh, the virus. Like, the virus just ended. Like, no one's died today. I thought that was ridiculous. And then we see all these people in the diner, and one woman on her phone telling someone she loves them. I just can't believe there wouldn't have been more chaos, or that everyone in the diner would not have been on their phone.
It feels like kind of like a 1950s Americana ending, is what that feels like to me. But again, I like the central idea a lot, and there's a lot to talk about. But I think we needed to spend somehow in this film version a little more time with this gay couple to because I felt like I was projecting a lot of things. Like I can see these little hints about why Eric might be acting away versus Andrew, but I don't know, something for a filmmaker that's obsessed with definites, like give me something, kind of some characterization. Think of like the depth we get about Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix in Signs, for instance, in the background that allows us to understand why they're acting in this current situation.
What would you give this film?
2.5. I
would give it 2.5 out of 5 as well. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button, listen to our podcast. Bye.